What if the most romantic food culture in the world was built almost entirely on borrowed ideas? What if the dishes you've been ordering in French accents, the ones plated with that effortless Parisian elegance, didn't actually start in Paris at all? What if French cuisine is less a birthplace and more a rebrand, the greatest culinary marketing story ever told? France didn't invent the food. France invented the feeling around it. Welcome to Dish Atlas. And if you've never questioned what's really on your plate, you're about to start. Hit subscribe so you never miss a story like this one. Food number 1, the croissant. Few foods say Paris quite like the croissant, that golden, shatteringly crisp pastry that seems to exist purely to justify sitting at a sidewalk cafe with a tiny cup of coffee. But here's the thing. The croissant is not French. It was born in Vienna, Austria, in the 17th century as a pastry called the Kipferl, a crescent-shaped roll that Viennese bakers had been making for decades before France ever touched it. The story gets better. When August Zang, an Austrian artillery officer turned entrepreneur, opened a Viennese bakery in Paris in 1838, he brought the laminated buttery technique with him. The French took one bite, claimed it as their own, and never looked back. Here's the fact that stops people cold. The croissant's crescent shape is widely believed to commemorate the defeat of the Ottoman Empire at the Siege of Vienna in 1683. The bakers were literally celebrating by eating the enemy's symbol. That's not a pastry. That's a war trophy you dip in coffee. Today, the croissant is the single most recognizable symbol of French breakfast culture. A reminder that the most powerful thing a culture can do isn't always inventing something new. Sometimes it's simply perfecting what it borrowed. Food number 2, the macaron. The macaron, pastel-colored, impossibly delicate, sold in Parisian patisserie windows like edible jewelry, feels like it was dreamed up on the banks of the Seine. The silky ganache filling the chewy almond shell, the way it practically dissolves on your tongue. Nothing could be more French, except that it isn't. The macaron traces its roots to Renaissance Italy, carried into France in 1533 by Catherine de' Medici's personal pastry chefs when she traveled from Florence to marry the future King Henry II of France. At the time, it was nothing more than a simple almond meringue cookie. No filling, no color, no fanfare. Just a small, humble Italian confection that hitched a ride on a royal wedding. The jaw-dropping detail most people never hear. The iconic Parisian double-decker macaron with the ganache, filling the one Ladurée turned into a luxury icon, wasn't created until 1930. That means for nearly 400 years, France had the macaron and never thought to put anything inside it. Pierre Desfontaines of Ladurée sandwiched two shells together almost as an afterthought and accidentally created one of the most photographed foods in human history. What started as a Florentine wedding gift became a billion-dollar French brand. Proof that reinvention, not invention, is sometimes the more powerful act. Food number 3, French onion soup. French onion soup feels like the soul of Paris in a bowl. That deep amber broth, the slow caramelized onions, the thick crouton drowning under a molten blanket of Gruyere cheese bubbling and golden from the broiler. It feels ancient, intentional, aristocratic. But the true origin of onion soup stretches back to ancient Rome, where onion-based broths were considered peasant food, cheap filling and built entirely from survival, not sophistication. The French version, as we know it today, was codified much later, with the earliest recognizable recipe appearing in 18th century France. But the dish itself belongs to no single nation. Onion soup existed across Greece, Rome, and medieval Europe long before Paris ever claimed it. Here's the detail that reframes everything. The version most celebrated today, gratiné broiled, served in a ceramic crock, was popularized not in a grand Parisian restaurant, but in the working-class market halls of Les Halles, where butchers and laborers ate it at 4 in the morning after brutal overnight shifts. This was not elegant dining. This was exhausted hands wrapped around a warm bowl before dawn. French onion soup is ultimately a story about transformation, how the food of the bone-tired and the hungry climbed its way into five-star menus worldwide, and made people feel rich eating something that was always meant for the poor. Food number 4. Creme brulee. There is something almost theatrical about creme brulee. The way the spoon hovers for a moment above that perfectly caramelized sugar crust before cracking through into the cool, silky custard beneath. It feels designed for candlelight, for romance for a restaurant, where the menu has no prices. It feels in every possible way French. But the earliest documented recipe for a burnt cream custard didn't appear in a Parisian cookbook. It appeared in a 1691 English cookbook by François Massielot. And even that attribution is contested because the Spanish had been making a nearly identical dessert called crema catalana in Catalonia since at least the 14th century. Trinity College in Cambridge, England also lays claim to the dish, insisting their kitchen was branding the sugar crust with a college insignia long before France formalized it. The fact that makes food historians genuinely argue all three cultures, French, English, and Spanish, have credible documented claims to this dessert, and none of them is willing to concede. It is one of the only foods in history where three nations are actively fighting over the origin to this day, and the argument has never been settled. What creme brulee really represents is something bigger than custard. It's the story of how presentation and elegance can make a nation's version of something feel so definitively theirs that the rest of the world simply stops asking questions. Food number 5. The baguette. The baguette is perhaps the single most powerful symbol of French identity in the entire world. That long, flour-dusted wand of bread tucked under the arm of every cinematic Parisian still warm from the boulangerie, filling the street with the smell of crackling crust and soft, open crumb. It feels eternal, like it has always been there, like Paris without the baguette is simply not Paris. But the baguette, as we know it, long thin with that distinctive, crisp crust, was not standardized until the early 20th century, and its defining shape may have been shaped by an Austrian, not a Frenchman. Auguste Zang, the same Viennese baker who brought laminated dough techniques to Paris for the croissant, is also credited with introducing the steam injection oven method that creates the baguette's signature crackling crust. But here's the detail that truly reframes the icon. A 1920 French law prohibited bakers from starting work before 4 a.m., making it physically impossible to have round loaves ready in time for morning customers, since those required longer baking periods. The long, thin baguette shape was essentially engineered as a legal workaround. One of the most beloved foods in human history exists largely because of a labor regulation. It was that practical. The baguette is now a UNESCO intangible cultural heritage, a legal loophole that became a national treasure carried under millions of arms every single morning without a second thought. Food number 6. Hollandaise sauce. Hollandaise is the kind of sauce that makes ordinary food feel important. That warm, impossibly rich butter and egg yolk emulsion that spills over eggs Benedict like liquid gold, turning a simple poached egg into something that feels almost indulgent enough to apologize for. It carries a French name, lives on French menus, and sits proudly in the canon of the 5 French mother sauces. Yet the name itself is the first clue that something doesn't add up. Hollandaise literally means from Holland, and that is not a coincidence. The sauce is widely believed to have originated in the Netherlands, where high-quality butter was produced in extraordinary abundance, and Dutch butter was considered among the finest in all of Europe during the 17th century. The detail that reframes everything. During World War I, France faced severe butter shortages and began importing large quantities of premium Dutch butter specifically to maintain their culinary standards. Food historians believe this influx of Dutch butter directly inspired, or at minimum heavily influenced, the rich butter-forward sauce that France would later name, claim, and export to the world as quintessentially their own. France didn't create the ingredient. They created the legacy around it. Hollandaise is ultimately a story about how naming something with confidence is sometimes all it takes. The Dutch made the butter, but France made it famous, and the world has been ordering it in a French accent ever since. Food number 7. French dressing. French dressing. That tangy, rust-colored, slightly sweet vinaigrette that has been drizzled over American salads for generations carries its origin right there in the name. Bold and unambiguous. It sounds like it was bottled in Provence, crafted by someone's grandmother in a sun-drenched kitchen poured over fresh greens with the casual confidence that only the French seem to possess. But French dressing, particularly the creamy paprika-stained orange-red version that became an American staple, was invented entirely in the United States. France had nothing to do with it. The American version was developed in the early 20th century by food manufacturers looking to create an accessible mass-market salad dressing, and the word French was simply added to give it an air of sophistication and culinary credibility. Here's the fact that makes this almost absurd. In 2022, the United States Department of Agriculture actually updated its official definition of French dressing for the first time since 1950, meaning the American government spent 7 decades officially defining a food that France never made and doesn't recognize. Real French vinaigrette is nothing more than olive oil, vinegar, mustard, and salt. It contains no tomato, no sugar, and no resemblance whatsoever to the orange bottle sitting in American refrigerators. French dressing is one of the purest examples of culinary borrowed identity. A name used not to describe where something came from, but to conjure the feeling of somewhere people wished it had. Food number 8, fondue. Few dining experiences feel more romantically European than fondue. That bubbling pot of molten cheese at the center of the table, the long forks, the cubes of crusty bread dragged through warmth and richness, the whole ritual of gathering around something communal and unhurried. It feels like it belongs in a Parisian bistro, candlelit and intimate, the kind of meal that stretches for hours. France does claim a version of it, and proudly. But fondue was born in Switzerland in the alpine regions of Fribourg and Neuchâtel, where peasant farmers in the 17th and 18th centuries were simply trying to survive brutal mountain winters. The dish was not romantic in origin. It was radical practicality. Aging cheese and hardened bread, both too tough to eat alone, melted together into something that could sustain a family through months of snow and isolation. The detail that rewrites the romance entirely: Switzerland didn't just invent fondue out of culinary creativity. The Swiss Cheese Union actively and deliberately promoted fondue as a national symbol in the 20th century, lobbying to have it declared Switzerland's national dish, and even funding fondue sets to be distributed to Swiss embassies around the world as a form of soft power diplomacy. A peasant survival food became a geopolitical tool. Melted cheese as international relations. It was that audacious. Fondue is the story of how desperation dressed itself up in candlelight and convinced the entire world it had always been a celebration. Food number 9. Dijon mustard. Dijon mustard carries the name of a French city, sits in French kitchens, anchors French vinaigrettes, and is inseparable from the identity of Burgundian cuisine. Sharp, pale, silky, with that clean heat that hits the back of the throat and disappears just as fast. It feels as French as the Eiffel Tower. And while Dijon, France is absolutely the city that refined and commercialized this mustard into the product the world knows today, the mustard seed itself and the technique of grinding it into paste traveled to Dijon from somewhere else entirely carried by Romans who spread mustard cultivation across Europe as they expanded their empire nearly 2,000 years ago. The specific Dijon style was formalized in 1856 when Maurice Grey and Auguste Poupon partnered to create the recipe that would eventually become Grey Poupon, a name now so synonymous with sophistication that it starred in its own famous American television commercial. But here is the detail that genuinely surprises people. Today, the vast majority of mustard seeds used to produce Dijon mustard are not grown in France at all. They are grown in Canada, specifically in Saskatchewan, which produces roughly 80% of the world's mustard seed supply. The most French-feeling condiment on earth is built almost entirely on Canadian agriculture, France provides the method, the name, and the mystique. Canada quietly provides the ingredient. Dijon mustard is proof that origin and identity are two entirely different things, and that a name spoken with enough conviction can relocate a food's entire history. Food number 10, the Napoleon pastry. The Napoleon, those razor-thin layers of shatteringly crisp puff pastry, stacked high with rich vanilla custard cream, dusted with powdered sugar, or striped with fondant icing. It feels like it was named for France's most famous emperor, born in the grand patisseries of Paris. As imperial and dramatic as the man himself, the name alone conjures tricorn hats and battlefield glory. But the Napoleon pastry almost certainly did not originate in France, and most food historians trace its true roots to Naples, Italy, where a similar layered pastry called millefeuille or napoletano was being made long before it ever appeared on a Parisian menu. The name Napoleon is widely believed to be a French corruption of Napolitain, meaning of Naples, a linguistic drift that quietly erased an entire city's contribution and replaced it with an emperor's legend. Here is the detail that makes this story extraordinary. Napoleon Bonaparte himself was reportedly not particularly fond of elaborate pastries, preferring simple plain food, meaning the most famous pastry bearing a conqueror's name may have been a food the conqueror never actually enjoyed. History attached his identity to something he likely never claimed, and the pastry wore that name across centuries without ever being corrected. The Napoleon is the perfect closing note for this entire list, a food whose very name is a beautiful layered act of historical reinvention, just like France's relationship with cuisine itself. 10 foods, 10 stories, and not a single one that began exactly where the world assumed it did. That is the real genius of French cuisine. Not that France invented everything, but that France understood something deeper than invention. That how you present a food, how you name it, and how you feel while eating it can become more powerful than where it actually came from. France didn't steal these foods. France transformed them, and in doing so taught the whole world how to fall in love with eating. If this video changed the way you see what's on your plate, hit the like button. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. Subscribe to Dish Atlas so you never miss a story hiding in plain sight. And tell me in the comments which of these 10 surprised you the most. I want to know which one made you stop and say, "Wait, really?"